demonic. It's demonic. Destroy every male child. What is he trying to do? He's trying to get rid of the promised seed. If I could kill every male child, we never get to Yeshua. The evil one has whispered into the ear of Pharaoh and said, just kill every male child. That's the answer. And enlist the Hebrew midwives to do it for you. Yes.
I'm reading this book called Complicity During the Holocaust, and the subtitle is The Role of the Church in Universities in the Third Reich. And it is a mind-blowing book on the insidiousness of the Nazi regime through the church. But what was interesting is that the Lutheran Church and the Catholic Church in Germany were funded by the government. They had a state tax, and so they were all employees of the state of Germany, which I did not know.
Yes.
And they were rebelling against the Weimar regime, which came about after World War I, where World War I was under more of a dictatorship, and the Weimar was democratic.
Yes.
And the Democrats were considered liberals. And they didn't like democracy because democracy gave people choice. So it's a really fascinating
we'll read it.
to read.
Yeah, go ahead.
Isn't Satan really smart?
Yes.
Why did he believe that he could stop God's plans then? Doesn't he know?
It's never, look, rebellion.
And couldn't he have a better plan than killing a bunch of baby wardens?
But you know what? Rebellion against God is never based on smarts. Why do people rebel against God today? They think they can get away with it. He won't see it. I can get away with it. He'll make an exception in my case. People are all the time rebelling against the Holy One.
Or they do it in the name of God.
Or they do it in the name of God, and they think, well, I'll get away with it.
Do you think Satan knows better than human beings that it's a failed attempt?
I think he does, but you got to make the attempt anyway.
What he wants to do is he wants to really defeat the body of believers the best he can. If he can do his part to really allow them.
Yeah, exactly. Look what I'm saying is this. If the only thing that makes sense of world leaders what makes you as a world leader, other than the evil one, wake up someday and think to yourself, I should genocide everybody in my country and everybody in any country that gets in my way. I should just kill everybody. I don't care who they are. I'll destroy them all. That kind of thought
Herod.
comes from, Herod comes from the evil one.
Yeah.
It's demonic. And that's my point, is that this is being driven by forces much more insidious and much stronger than just Pharaoh. Pharaoh's a pawn. World leaders are pawns. They don't know that. They think, well, it's all coming from me. But the one speaking in their ears telling them to do this is the evil one. Now, watch what happens here. Verse 19. And the midwives said to Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, for they are lively and give birth before the midwives come to them. Okay. Therefore God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and grew very mighty. And so it was, because the midwives feared God, that he provided households for them. So Pharaoh commanded, now look at what he does. First he tries to enslave them. Then he tries to genocide them. Then he says, okay, forget the midwives. Verse 22. So Pharaoh commanded all his people, saying, every son who is born you shall cast into the river, and every daughter you shall save alive. Okay, well, now let's list everybody. Forget the midwives. Bring everybody on board. Look what happens now. That's the context. That's the context for chapter 2. Look what happens. And a man of the house of Levi went and took a wife, a daughter of Levi. So the woman conceived and bore a son. By the way, we're truncating a lot of narrative here because later on, we're going to find out this man already has a daughter and he already has a son. So we're just going to focus in on one son here. Aaron was 3 years older than his brother. So she's got a 3-year-old this time. Miriam is a little bit older than Aaron. So we have Miriam, Aaron, Moses. Now look what happens. And when she saw that he was a beautiful child, she hid him 3 months. When she could no longer hide him, she took an ark of bulrushes, daubed it with asphalt and pitch, put the child in it, and laid it in the reeds by the river's bank. Anybody reading Genesis says, that sounds very familiar. It's called an ark. And by the way, it's painted with pitch. And we're going to put it in the water. Sounds like hypertext Noah building an ark, okay?
When you keep saying hypertext with Moses, are you saying he invented the internet, not Al Gore?
Yes, Al Gore, I'm going to go on record. Moses invented the internet and hypertexting, not Al Gore. All right, so look what happens.
But it was still in a basement.
Yeah, that's true. All right. Now look what happens. She puts the child in the river. They were told that you had to throw the children in the river. That's what he says. Listen, you shall cast in the river every daughter you shall save alive. So she actually put her son in the river.
There you go. That was probably the safest place to put him.
Yes, it was. She puts him in this little ark. Coats it with pitch and with asphalt to make sure that it doesn't take on water. Covers him up with a blanket. Now look what happens. It says, then the daughter of Pharaoh, verse 5, came down to the bay at the river. And her maids walked along the riverside. When she saw the ark among the reeds, she sent her maid to get it. And when she opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the baby wept. So she had compassion on him and said, this is one of the Hebrew children. How did she know he was one of the Hebrew children?
He was in the river? That's where they belong.
Well, some people say, well, it was the blanket.
Circumcised.
Circumcised. Yeah, she opens up, he's circumcised. By the way, let's go back to our covenants. We never finished the covenants. You people threw me off. We have,
We're good.
So we have Abrahamic covenant. Abrahamic covenant, sign of the covenant, circumcision. What's the next covenant?
Moses.
David?
No.
Moses. Mosaic covenant.
Okay.
We're going to do in order. Mosaic covenant. What's the sign of the Mosaic covenant? Shabbat. Next we have the Davidic covenant. What's the sign of the Davidic covenant?
Throne.
What?
Kingship. Throne.
Kingship. That there will always be a king on the throne.
That's right.
There will always be a king on the throne. Then there's the Jeremiah 31, the new covenant, made with the house of Israel and the house of Judah. And it doesn't really tell us a sign, but new covenant.
Yeah, put the words will be on your heart.
Right, write the Torah on your heart. Sign of the new covenant, Torah will be written on your heart. Yes.
The Davidic covenant is easier for me to ask this question about rather than maybe some of the other covenants.
Okay.
It says, the way I've read it, and I'm a business guy, right? That's why I read contracts all the time. So in the covenant, there's an if-then. If you do this, then I'll do that.
Yes.
And nobody ever does the if part for God. So why do we expect that part? If it's a fair deal, God said, look, I tell you what, you and your kids love me, do right, you'll never have anybody that'll leave the throne. 3 generations later, it's a disaster, and they've ruined it. And why do we still, I do expect it personally, but I don't know why. Why would we expect him to fulfill his side of the bargain when ours is unfulfilled? Or theirs, and every one that's ever happened?
That's a great question. The bottom line to that is this, that God enters into these covenants knowing that already. Irregardless, he still makes the covenant. He actually says in Deuteronomy, we know this, he says, entering into these, taking these covenants, he says, I know you people are going to fail. I know you're going to screw up. You've been screw up from the beginning, you're going to continue to screw up. But I'm going to accomplish my purposes through you and because here's what it's about. Here's the point. That's a great question. And here's the point of it. It's never been about us to begin with.
What?
It's been about him all along.
Aha.
Yeah, but I got a ticket to heaven that says free ride.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you got your free ride. Okay.
Good luck with that.
Good luck with that. Yeah. Let me know how that works out for you.
Yeah.
But here's so this is how many people think, well, I got my ticket, I'm good to go. But he's saying, look, listen to Yeshua. Listen to Yeshua, what he's talking about. He doesn't go around saying to people, hey, make sure you get your ticket to heaven. Get your ticket to heaven, we got tickets. He says, seek first the kingdom. Pray that the kingdom will come. Repent, for the kingdom is at hand. Seek first the kingdom. It's all about the rule of God.
Amen.
Everything is about Him coming here to rule and reign. If you want to get on board with that, great. If you don't get on board with that, that's up to you.
It's not so great, but
Not so great. But the covenants were designed for Him to move us where He wanted us to be. Even despite our failure and our working against Him. There would always be, this is what He understood. God understood this from the beginning. He says this. There would always be a remnant that would be obedient and that would be faithful. A very small remnant. The road into the kingdom is extremely narrow. He didn't pave it very wide. Not many people want to surrender. Not what's happened. What happens? Verse 7. Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, shall I go and call a nurse for you from the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for you? And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, go. So the maiden went and called the child's mother. Then Pharaoh's daughter said to her, take this child away and nurse him for me, and I will give you your wages. So the women took the child and nursed him. And the child grew, and she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She called his name Moshe, saying, because I have Mashah, drawn him out of the water. Play on the name. Now look what happens. Verse 11. Now it came to pass in those days when Moses was grown, that he went out to his brethren and looked at their burdens. And he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his brethren. These guys are going at it pretty good. And the text here indicates that this beating, this was not, they weren't just wrestling, that this was somewhat violent.
life-threatening.
Life-threatening. He says, when he saw no one, well, actually he does this. Moses does one of these. Looks around first. By the way, if you ever have to do that,
You're up to no good.
you're already up to no good. If you have to look around and go, is anybody watching? The answer is yes. Don't do this. The answer is yes, there's somebody watching. We look around, right? He looks around, he says, he looks this way, he looks that way, and he doesn't see anybody. And Moses is a man of justice. He rises up, knocks this man on the head or wherever, kills him,
Graveyard dead.
buries him in the sand.
Worst place to bury somebody.
The Pharaoh's daughter explained the fact that she has this son to her dad.
Oh, well, by
Was she
the
married? I mean, was she?
we don't know. We don't know how she explains it. That's a great question. That's one of those questions that we'll ask Moses when we get to the world to come. Hey Moses, how did your mother pass this law? You know?
What kid? What son?
Yeah,
And what-
drown you in the river, and here you are.
Yeah, that's one of those. I'll put that down as one of those questions I want to ask Moses.
Doesn't the scripture say that she presented it to Pharaoh and said, I found it in the river?
Yeah. But it's still weird because
Yeah, it followed me home. Can I keep it? I don't know.
That's precisely how I perceive it.
And that's because it's cute. No, all it says is this. It says, and the child grew, and she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter. So his mother, eventually, she weans him, brings him to Pharaoh's daughter, and then it just says, and he became her son.
Wait, so I got a question. So Pharaoh was so stupid that he gave the order to kill all the Hebrew boys, but then one slipped into his own palace?
Yeah, because you know what? You got to understand something. He may have had, there's belief that Pharaoh may have had many wives and many children. So keeping up with all this family, because you got to understand something. This goes back. This deals with the issue of Solomon. People look at Solomon and go, "How could that man have 1,000 wives?" I mean, that's just crazy. But here's what you have to understand. Here's what you have to understand. Ancient Near Eastern culture. If you make a treaty with another group of people, one of the things you do is you give them one of your women, and they give you one of their women, as a means of solidifying the treaty.
you become related.
You become related. You have one of us, we have one of you, we're connected. Now, he may never even seen half of these. They're a gift to the state. It's a transaction based on covenant and treaties. It has nothing to do with love and romance.
Yeah, but Moses wasn't just a random kid of his. He came to rule.
I know what I'm saying is the Pharaoh has probably multiple wives and multiple daughters and sons, so that to try to keep up with every single one of them would have been almost impossible.
He became a prince?
Well, Moses doesn't become a prince in the sense of what we think of. We kind of build that in. It just says he was one of her sons. He never says he never says that he becomes prominent in the kingdom. We've made that up. It's a great story. It's a great story, and I went and watched The Prince of Egypt. Okay. But the narrative itself here never says that Moses comes into Pharaoh's presence. We never even know if Moses ever saw Pharaoh. You could be one of Pharaoh's grandchildren and never see him. You could be one of his children and never see him.
So he didn't spend time with Pharaoh and stuff?
Probably not. Most likely not. The one thing Moses does do, though, is he gets an Egyptian education. That's key. Yes.
While he's with that short time with his mother, he's also getting a Hebrew education.
Yes.
Which identifies him. He recognizes his brother because of that.
Yes.
Even though just a couple of
Yes,
years.
he has enough time with his mother for her to instill in him that he's a Hebrew.
Yeah.
Now watch what happens. Verse 14. They said, he goes out, verse 11. Now it came to pass in those days when Moses was grown. I want to skip down. Verse 13, excuse me. And when he went out the second day, first day he kills an Egyptian. Next day he goes out, 2 Hebrew men are fighting. He said to them, why are you striking your companion? He said, who made you a prince and a judge over us? Do you intend to kill me as you killed the Egyptian? So Moses feared and said, and who does he fear? He fears Pharaoh. Fears man. Anytime you start fearing man, you're messed up. If you have any fear of another human being, you're in a bad situation. Fear no one but God.
Is it also possible that this Hebrew gentleman was also the same gentleman that was in the fight with the Egyptians? Is that why he knew?
Could have been. Could have been.
I don't know.
Now see, there's one of those other questions. Maybe the guy that was the Hebrew and the Egyptian were fighting the first day. This guy's he likes to fight.
Yeah, he's a hoodlum. He's probably in trouble all the time.
Yeah, so next day he's fighting somebody else, but this time it happens to be a Hebrew. Could be. Speculation, but could be. That would explain how he knows
Yeah.
the whole story. Now that's the kind of stuff that the rabbis would delve into. That's kind of the discussion they would have. How did this guy know? Right? So that's
I'm part rabbi.
You're part rabbi. Woo! Great.
Rabbi Dan.
Rabbi Dan. Now look what happens.
Rabbi Dan.
Moses fears and he says, surely this thing is known. When Pharaoh heard of this matter, he sought to kill Moses. But Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh, dwelt in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. Now, let's go back to Genesis. Anytime anybody goes to a well, we all know that it's a place of romance. We start playing romantic music. You get violins. Because we know that men and women are going to meet at a well.
It's like a coffee shop.
It's like a coffee, it's a watering hole. You know what I mean? It's a watering hole.
So we're doing internet dating all
It's like the
wrong.
water cooler at work. Okay, so look what happens. It says, now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came and drew water, and they filled the troughs to water their father's flock. Then the shepherds came and drove them away. Uh-oh. Moses doesn't like injustice. We already know he doesn't like people fighting. Right? So here's what happens. It says, but Moses stood up. This guy must have been some kind of guy. He must have been a big enough guy that people listened to him. And he helped them and watered their flock. These girls, though, show no hospitality. They show up early back at home, and their father says, hey girls, didn't expect you so soon. And they said, well, we met this guy, an Egyptian, and he helped us water the flocks. Well, girls, where's your hospitality? You didn't invite the guy over for dinner. So they go back and they find Moses, they bring him back. And Moses, verse 21, was content to live with the man, and he gave Zipporah, his daughter, to Moses. Zipporah means ladybird. Zippor, bird, feminine. Zipporah, ladybird. And look what happens. She bore him a son. And his name is called Gershom. Sham meaning there, Ger meaning foreigner. He says, I'm a foreigner there. He names the child Gershom. Now look what happens. Now it happened in the process of time that the king of Egypt died. Then the children of Israel groaned because of the bondage, and they cried out, and their cry came up to God because, look what happens. God heard their groaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. And God looked upon the children of Israel, and God acknowledged them. Everything is based on covenant. Everything is based on covenant.
So since you're saying that all covenants apply to everyone, right?
Yes.
So why did he make it with just a specific group of people and not everyone?
Well, because in order for God to do the work he's going to do, you can't, it would, not that he couldn't, I shouldn't say he can't, but it was his sovereign choice and design to work through a particular people group.
Small group.
Small group. Here's another reason why. I think he chose a small group. If he chooses a big group, people will say, well, see there, look, that was because the people were so mighty, that they were so big, they were so incredibly awesome. Well, of course they were going to accomplish great things because, well, it was a big group of people. He chooses a very small group to say, hey, look, I can get the glory through these people because it's a very small, insignificant group. I can do the work I want to do, which is to, here's the ultimate thing, to bring about a king who will come to this earth to rule and reign. To have a king who will come to this earth to rule and reign. Now, how do we do that? So he's going to use a people group, and not only is it about when we bring the king in, it's not only just about the king. It's also about the rules of the kingdom. I need a people group that I can give these commandments to, who will live these commandments out in front of all the other nations, so that the other nations will attach themselves to this and will say, we want to be a part of this because your God and what he is doing, the commandments he has given, are so incredibly awesome that we want to be a part of it. That's the plan. Yes.
I was just thinking that, when God called Abraham, I mean, that was an idealistic kind of, society because, said that Abraham's dad was an idol worshiper. Yes.
And
we're told that Terah, his father, was an idolater.
Right. So, but God knows hearts of people, so he said, Abraham, leave.
Right.
So
he pulled Abraham away from his family.
Yeah, and so because of Abraham's heart, God saw he could use Abraham for the,
Yeah, God's sovereign choice was to say to one man, in you, all the nations of the earth will be blessed. Abraham, I'm going to do something so big in you, you have no idea how huge it is.
Yeah.
You can't even begin to fathom how huge this is. Then there's Abraham, and he gives him this promise. Then to Isaac, and then to Jacob. And Jacob's name is changed to Israel. And Israel has 11 sons. And this begins to mushroom into the people of Israel to the point that he's working with this people group. And here's another thing. If you look at the map, and if you look at where Israel is located geographically, it's right almost in the center of the world. Everything centrifugally flows to it. So he's going to pick this small people group right in the middle of the globe. So
in the middle of his enemies.
Huh?
And surrounded by his
and
enemies.
surrounded by their enemies, and say, you know what, I'm going to work through you because you're small, you're insignificant. I'll get the glory. Now look what happens. We got to move on real quick here. This is important. Look at chapter 3, real quick. Now Moses was tending the flock of Yithro, his father-in-law. By the way, earlier it says his name. The name of his father-in-law was Ruel. So people go, well, see there, the Bible makes mistakes. Like, no, you can have more than one name. It's okay to have more than one name. Most of us do. Some of them we use in public and some of them we don't. Yeah.
You mean like dipstick?
I got to tell you this true story. True story. The first day of college, my first day of college hadn't even started yet. I get to my dorm room, and there's about 20 guys in my dorm room. They're all. I get there. There's 20 guys stuffed in this dorm room, and there's a guy named. I wish you guys could meet him. His name was Tim Bunky. His last name was Bunky, B-U-N-K-E. We called him Binks. Nobody ever called him Bunky, and he never went by his first name. We always called him Binks. Hey, Binks, get over here. I walked, and Binks was hilarious. Binks was a graduate. He'd already graduated from college, and was a psychology major. They're always goofy anyway. They are. The psych majors are always goofy. So I walk into my room, and Binks is there with, I guess there's a bunch of other guys, and he says to me, "So, where are you from?" Like that. He doesn't know me from Adam, right? I just walk in, he goes, "So, where are you from?" And I said, "I'm from Alaska." And he says, "Oh, so you're an icy," which is that machine in the 7-Eleven with that polar bear that goes round and around, the icy machine, right? So from that moment forward, for the rest of my time there, I was called Icy. I never went by my first name or my last name. I was better. "Hey, Icy, come here." Like, all right.
You started responding.
Bummer on
And I
that.
started responding to it.
Bummer
People
on
call
that.
it cross camera. "Hey, Icy." He's like, "Oh, all right."
I think you're pretty sweet.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Most people think I'm just cold. Okay.
Wow, you suck it up already.
Thank you for going that direction. Okay, look what happens here. Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. And he led the flock to the back of the desert and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. By the way, listen to this. Listen to what I'm going to say. Please, if you get, I want you to hear this. This is important. He puts Moses out in the wilderness. For 40 years, Moses is going to be in this wilderness. Turns out he's going to come back to that same wilderness for another 40 years. This time with a bigger flock and a better flock. God doesn't waste any experience on us. The things he is doing in you and I today are for the future. He's building in us what he's going to do for the future. He is sovereign. So he puts Moses out in this wilderness, in this Midian desert. By Horeb. Horeb also has another name, Sinai. Moses is going to come back to this mountain one day. He's going to know this area. He's going to have traipsed this area with his flocks for 40 years. Now watch what happens. It says, verse 2, "And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire from the midst of the bush." It's my assertion, based on what we've seen from other texts in the Hebrew Scripture, that this angel of the Lord is Yeshua.
Yeah.
But now watch what happens. He looked, and behold, the bush was burning with fire, but the bush was not consumed. Then Moses says, "I will now turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush does not burn." Now look at this. Verse 4 says this. "So when the Lord, Yod-Heh-Vah-Heh, saw that he turned aside to look, Elohim called to him from the midst of the bush and said, 'Moshe, Moshe.'" Angel of the Lord, Yod-Heh-Vah-Heh, Elohim. Doesn't matter. They're all three working together. They're all three one and the same. Not that this bush is crowded. It's not like there's three guys that are going, hey, come on. Trying to mess, I'm in the bush here, man. I mean, I got the angel of the Lord here, and I got Elohim here, and I got Yahweh here. It's not like they're all three that are going, hey. Yeah, what we have is angel of the Lord equals Yod-Heh-Vah-Heh